Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here in YouTube, you'll see a little link down below. You can use that link to get to Zoom, and then you can use Zoom to get to Makana, and that's where you can ask questions and ask and chat with everyone. And so that's really where you want to be. If you see this fine group that has assembled here, and you'd like to actually be part of the panel, if you think you have something to add, at some point in this show, you'll be watching and you'll go, that's the wrong answer. I knew better. Well, that's you know why we said that answer is because you weren't here. You weren't here. You weren't here to be part of the panel. So it's a great way to kind of share your knowledge with everyone is to join the panel. If you're not sure if you're ready, we're looking for people with good audio, good video, good internet. You can join as early as 6 a.m. That's when we start just kind of hanging out, having coffee and tea, and talking. But it's a great time for you to come in and check your system and see how you're doing. You need to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to be part of the mic check. So the mic check is where we make sure that everyone's really ready to go and kind of move through that. So be here by 6:40, and we'd love to have you as part of the panel. At 7 o'clock, of course, we go into general questions. General questions are anything you want to ask about media production, virtual production. Those things are all fair game. The best thing to do is to think about the questions. I've kind of taken it on where I'm trying to think of not a lot of questions for the day, but one. Like what's my one question for today that I'm going to ask? So I'm putting in a question. If everybody did that, we wouldn't have enough time to get through it. So just try to think of one question that you can ask every day, and then that kind of helps us figure out what we're going to talk about. And so then the second hour is a more vertical hour where we're going to talk about something specific. Today, we're going to talk about OSC, not Zoom OSC, but just OSC, and what it is and how it works. Last week, we had a great deep discussion about DMX. And hopefully we'll have something that equals it or gets close to it about OSC today, this week. If you want to see what else we're going to be covering in the coming days, you can look at the email that you get from us every day as a registrant of Zoom. All right, let's jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, first one comes in from Rob Greenlee in Norwalk. He doesn't say whether it's Connecticut, Ohio, or California, but it is what's the best sounding cheek mic, what we tend to talk about as head-worn mic. He likes skin-colored units.
I think that you can get most of them as skin-colored units of different ones. A lot of corporations that we work with right now go to black, so they don't have to think about it. Like they don't want to keep on adjusting or buying lots of different ones, and so black has become kind of like just jet black is the new thing, right? The black is the new black, I guess is what you'd say. There is, I think that I use a DPA 4060. What I'm using right now is a DPA 4066. At home, I have a Countryman H6, and those are probably my two favorites. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, this is one of those what's the best sounding is real tough because, as we all know, it depends. And it depends in large part on your voice and how you project it. A mic that sounds great for one person may sound not quite as great for another one. If you have a problem with sibilance, one of the mics that is very articulate and in that range of S's could be a problem for you. On the other hand, if you have a low bassy voice and you want to get some of that out, a head-worn mic that doesn't give you much bass, like the real inexpensive ones, may turn out to be something that's unsatisfying too. So you kind of got to match the voice and the mic together if you want to get to that holy grail of, wow, I sound as good as I can. Alex, you're muted.
I would say that go ahead, Guy. You were going to say something?
I was just going to say, Alex, you and I both have the DPA 4066, but we have the older versions. There's a newer version called the 4066 Core, which adds a little bit more of an amplifier technology that they've come up with to give an even richer sound. So take a look. I put the link in.
I'll check that out. Yeah, I think that what I have found in general is the DPA has a little bit better bass response, and the Countryman is a little bit more present, at least at its default unit. And so we've been buying a lot more Countryman than DPAs because of that. It's more predictable for everybody that we would send it to. So it's a mixture. I think those two for me are the two leaders of that. Of that choice. Go ahead, Chuck. At any price, like there's ones at $15-$20 that are great, but when you ask what you think is the best, that's what I would say. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think prior to March, I would have always said Countryman H6 or the E series. DPA 46 are amazing, but we've been surprised at how well, out of necessity, for streaming. I don't know if I would use this if I needed high quality recordings, but these pile mics and these Polsons and how adequate they've been. I want to say great, but adequate.
Yeah, I would say that I still feel like the Polsons, especially for $15 or $20, gets about 80% there. Maybe 70% there, 70-80%, and especially with Zoom's noise cancellation, it evens it out because it's cutting out a lot of the things. The big problem with the cheaper mics is the inherent analog hiss that goes along with them. So that's what we still hear a fair bit of with the cheaper mics. But the Zoom is pretty good at getting rid of that. Go ahead, Victor.
As an example, Alex is using the Countryman. This is the DPA 4066 that I'm using here.
I'm actually using the 4066 today because I use the 4066 at the office and the Countryman at home. So so I have two different ones, two different setups there. So
there you go.
You go ahead, Sky.
From the sheer functionality, please make sure to get the dual ear one. This single ear is a mess.
Yeah, we definitely avoid the single ear solution, which was so popular before. Next question.
Alex Forty Golner, who's in the panel today from London. Hi, Alex. Good to see you. Asks from London, if you have any keynotes at CES, have you spotted any trends, bad technique, or good technique?
I think that I have found I haven't really watched any in detail. I've scanned through them. I think that there's been a couple people live streaming one CES event after the other. And maybe it was CES. I just looked on YouTube. I think that one of the things I was left with is the idea of creating a virtual set and having everyone stand on it to recreate the quote unquote stage experience feels absurd for me. Like just kind of like you're just trying to do something that you're not doing. And so, so I found that the virtual set, you can just see that they're on a green screen. Some of them are on LED walls, but I felt like in this time, having people come in, at this time, having people try to come in and make it look like they're on a stage, I wasn't really sure that really hit the right tone. And I found it to be a bit forced and overdone. On the other side of that, I found people trying to do kind of low quality, hey, we're all going to come in from our home with real bad audio and bad video and, screen grabs that don't really work. And, so that was the other side of the keynotes. I haven't seen anything yet that is, I would say, a happy medium, between those. Has anyone seen anything that they liked? Go ahead, Alex.
Well, Engadget are doing keynotes, 2 or 3 hour keynotes in 5 minutes or 9 minutes. So they're doing cut down versions of CES keynotes. So it's a way of kind of seeing roughly what they are like. And I'm just looking at it from a kind of graphic design perspective and staging perspective. Intel seemed to create a big booth. So their virtual set or actual set was a big booth, it seemed to me, from a trade fair, which I thought was very odd. Their graphics, the common thing for them and other people like LG seem to be graphics overlaid onto video, bullet points being built up as people were speaking, and maybe a little bit too much animation around those bullet points, but they seem to want to play with that a bit. And also maybe to some extent Intel were trying very hard because of course they have a very tough sell this year. So you could actually compare different people with different things. LG had many more videos that they were showing, and many more things they were showing prepared in advance as opposed to simulating the stage experience, I would say. So that's the couple that I saw.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, overall, I was kind of underwhelmed. I thought a lot of people would take more advantage of the medium and explore a little more, and there really wasn't a whole lot of exploration happening. I was wondering, and anyone else who has seen it, this preponderance of having someone deliver straight to camera and then have the second shot off to the side, as if they're talking off to the side. It's just totally. I don't know. It's unsettling to me. Who are they talking to? What is going on? It seems like a trend or a technique, and leave it alone. You want to relate to the audience. I feel anyway. I didn't like this whole cutting away.
I think it's a function actually of the fact that we all are now using video conferencing, that we're all used to people doing a fairly direct address straight to camera, and the result is that the traditional interview style of I'm going to look over here and talk. I mean, that's a very traditional interview style. You can go back and watch, Civil War by Ken Burns, and everybody's looking off camera. And the reason that they did that back then was because they didn't really build the the only person that was really breaking ground there was Errol Morris. And so, Errol Morris, I mean, there were other people that created it, I know, but the only person that was using it regularly, go ahead. And Courtney, were you using the Teratron, Courtney, often?
Yes, we used to do it before he even invented a name for it. But yeah, we would use it not necessarily for interview type situations. We'd use it for situations where, you'd be doing a commercial with young children or something. We'd put the mother's image or the director's image in the camera to get the kid to look in the camera, especially toddlers or babies, But
Right.
But then, because I think it became creepy, because in dramatic films, the rule number one is never look in the camera, and so for a lot of films, that it became okay. Look off camera, because the audience knows there's an interviewer there. You know what they're looking at.
Right.
But if they don't see an audience out there, I've had that in a couple of transitional fundraisers and stuff that we do teleprompting on, that they want to go to the old style of a big teleprompter at the back of a room, but there's no audience there. And I go, no, you don't want that. You want it on the camera. No, well, we always have it at the back of the room, or we have presidential style. They order presidential style with the two
Right.
pieces of glass.
I mean,
for a webinar, for a live stream where there's no audience, and I tell them, no, that's the wrong way to go. You don't want to do the old way. You need to do the new way.
Admittedly, there's an awful lot of event. I mean, we deal with it almost on a daily basis, that there is some new event company that is trying to stay relevant. Their entire, we have to understand their entire business has been disrupted, and they're trying to figure out how to make payroll, and how to keep people on staff, and how to pay the rent, and and they're trying to figure it out, and they don't know how to do it any other way. And so a lot of what we're seeing is them, you have companies with budget. They have the budget for the event, right? That was probably earmarked a year ago. So they have the budget for it. They just don't know what to do with it. You have event companies that were working with them that say, oh, I know what to do with it. And they spin up a thing that seems reasonable. And then you end up with what we're seeing at CES mostly. I think though that, again, I don't know when it's going to happen. We're bidding on things this spring that, if they go through, it kind of, they will never fit back into the physical form of events, and a lot of people will see them, and then they'll go, oh, we can do that. I think a lot of people just don't know what's possible once we stop being, not constrained by time and space. Go ahead, Chuck.
I was going to say, is that another 3-letter acronym, maybe?
Not contained by time and space.
No, that you're talking to about for the spring. I'm thinking NAB.
NAB is in
NAB.
October. So
it's on October now.
Yeah, it's going to be October, and they pushed it off. Of course, if we don't conquer not the funny thing, but the irony is, if we don't conquer COVID, of course, the fall will be another disaster. So you're planning into you're driving into the wrong lane on a highway, and so summer will be probably better for a variety of reasons, and so I don't know what will happen with NAB. Go ahead, Victor.
I'm going to be attending a virtual NAM event next week, so I'll be very interested in seeing how that comes off and how they are able to, pull that off, including some Audinate training sessions. So I'll report back.
I think that the real challenge is that it's just really what we see here every day is what people want is real conversations about things that they're interested in. I don't know if they need it to be more complicated than that, and I think that that's the thing is we want to have this wow and, all this stuff coming up, but we don't, that's the thing that I think people are challenged by still. Go ahead, Sky, and then Alex, and then we'll move on.
I just bringing theater back into the tradition of as an audience member, Courtney, on theater, we refer to that as the fourth wall, and you don't break the fourth wall. But now that the audience is physically at the other end of a monitor, that eye-to-eye communication or eye-to-eye connection, because we as humans want that relational experience. So again, Steve, to your point, why are they doing it? Well, possibly as an editor, I need something to cut away from, and consequently, those second cameras are useful.
Yeah,
and
but that's the thing is that's what I mean. In my opinion, as someone who has to do this a lot, is I don't want those side shots. I want graphics. B-roll. I want to paper that over with something else, especially if you're doing corporate. There's almost always a way to find something you can put over top of an edit rather than cutting to the side, because I think the side is horribly jarring. I think I agree with Steve that cutting away from either a ion or near ion experience is now jarring, because all of us sit in Zoom all the time looking at people. We just have a different experience of it. And so I think that's the challenge. And I think that the other challenge is, even now we still have corporate clients that are using teleprompters. And the hard part is that you get this kind of glassy-eyed look that you get with teleprompters. That is the challenge that we get. And so, the ones that are pushing it to the end have a teleprompter, but they're notes that kind of tell them where to go, and they've already memorized it. And so the teleprompter is reminding them what the next point is, but it's not the exact words. Go ahead, Alex, and then we'll move on.
I find certainly when it comes to the side view and that side camera, and I remember it being introduced about 10 years ago, certainly on factual shows. So you'd have the presenter talking to the audience about something they know, and there's something very sure of in the flow of the show, like we took the painting to be evaluated, and then they would go to the side when they wanted the personal interaction and human interaction of the presenter to what was going on. I was really surprised by what they said. That was really surprising to me. So that becomes it comes from it was used to have different kinds of communication when you were looking, and when you were treating the presenter or the person on the camera in a slightly different way, so you can see her in a slightly different narrative world. But most people didn't really pay attention to that and just thought, hey, we can use both angles and we can cut between them backwards and forwards. And of course, that makes no sense. And one other thing is, in the UK, events are more from the theatre perspective, creating a theatre set and then having a big stage, which could be like a drawing room in a country house or something like that, and people coming on with 17 different doors. And that's because events came out of the world of local theatre in the UK, whereas in America, it all looks good on the big screen because it came from TV. It's interesting that both now have to change to look like something different, which is to look through a Zoom conference.
Right, Courtney, last words, Courtney.
Yeah, we do get clients who'll say, okay, we've got 3 cameras, so we want 3 teleprompters, teleprompter on each camera. And I went, well, do you want the person to look into, which camera is the person going to be looking into? And they go, well, just a camera. Well, you're going to have a floor manager there to point them to the other cameras when you're going to switch to the other cameras, because they can only look in one camera at a time. Yeah. And they go, oh, yeah. And that's why you end up with a side shot with, that they don't look to. But you can do it with multiple teleprompters as long as you have a floor manager to cue them, like.
Or professional. Like a professional broadcaster with with tallies can, of course, do it, but it's something that they have to know what they're doing. And usually someone who only does this every quarter, it's harder to do that. Next question.
Moving on to Rick Combs of Columbia, Tennessee, who says, I have several thousand speech files that are in MP3 format. I'd like to upload them to somewhere like AWS and make them searchable, probably by title. Because of the quantity of them, I can't list them in a website. So is this possible? What's the best way to make them searchable?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill, and then Courtney.
So I'm not absolutely guaranteed about this, but I spent most of my life inside FileMaker Pro, and I know that FileMaker Pro, which is a subsidiary of Apple now, has a weighted database that you can link to things like MP3s, build a database with it, and then it has web links to a web storage repository. You can access them through all the iDevices, so phones and things like that, through the Mac OS on a computer. I've never tried to do something specific like this, but I suspect that all the pieces might be there, so that might be one possibility if you're on Mac.
Go ahead, Courtney, and then Peter.
Just look for a good ID3 tag editor, and that's how most databases access MP3s, because only the metadata attached to that MP3 and an ID3 tag, and there's 2 different versions of that, version 1, version 2. And you can find there's lots of ID3 tag editors. Unfortunately, it's going to involve you going to each single file and adding a specific ID3 tag to each one. And I don't know if there's any way to add a tag that actually, to make it searchable, they have to be different. So there's no way around the fact that you're going to have to add a different tag to each one. So it's just going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was actually going to say about the same as Courtney. Unless you can add the tags, the only thing you can search on is the file name. And I mean, I've done something akin to this for several thousand video files that we maintain for the Boy Scouts, and they're actually sitting on a read-only Google Drive, and they are searchable. The Mac will actually search them.
Well, and the other thing that you can look at is there are some services where you can put this up and have it transcribed automatically, and then people can at least search for the contents within the video, so that you can upload it. And I don't have the service on the top of my head, but I know I've worked with companies that do it, where everything can be transcribed automatically once they're up there, and then you can't. I mean, if you're not going to go through and actually give them, put in metadata, people can search and at least find the subject matter. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just want to say the reason I was thinking about FileMaker Pro is for exactly that numeric, renumbering or redesignating. That's formulaic, so you can tell it to add this and just increment by one each time, and you could do the whole list of 3,000, 5,000 in 5 minutes.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to A. Mitchells of Washington, and he asks, for those who believe that more is always better, it seems that there are a lot of connection issues this morning in the pre-show and pre-show across my devices, including just high CPU errors even after reboot. Did anyone else experience this? Seems like adding transcriptions plus HD plus overdrives plus whatever overdrives Zoom. Is that anybody else's experience?
Well, we were playing with transcribing in the pre-show, the 5 a.m. show. So the first breakfast. So we were playing with it, and maybe it is not as efficient. I don't know. Yeah, it could be something that was adding up, but it was an interesting experiment, and I don't see it available here. So I guess it's just a meetings thing that is available right now. Go ahead, Dan. I'm not host.
It's the host. Yeah, the host can enable it.
Anyway, next question.
Comes from Maranatha Spanish Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Why is the sequence of the numbers in the meters minus 24? Is this set up to confuse civilians?
Go ahead.
No,
ahead,
it's
go
not.
Ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
All right, I'll start this out, and I'm sure we'll get others to join in. But it's based on a system called digital full scale, and in digital full scale, 0 is distortion. It's the highest you can possibly go without, and 0 is distortion. So all the numbers below are obviously negative numbers. And just to give you a sense of how this would relate, if you look at a VU meter, a typical meter that you might be used to on your home stereos or whatever, typically you would use 0 as a reference level. Now 0 VU equals minus 24 DFS. Okay, so what's happening in a view meter, you can't see all the plus numbers because the meter moves so slowly. It reads an average level, and you're actually getting peaks that are just slamming the meter on the top end, but you can't see them. So in digital full scale, you have 24 dB to play with, and that's called your headroom. And it shows you how high all the peaks are going and how much over 0 you actually would be. I don't know. Somebody else jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, before we had digital sampling, we had antennas, and antennas cannot run hot. Well, they can run hot, but eventually they will burn out. And antennas are very expensive pieces of equipment to replace. So therefore, the industry had to come up with a way to know exactly what is the amount of signal I can send up to that antenna before it starts to heat up. And that's what 0 is. So when you get beyond that, the antenna would overheat. It's kind of the same reason white causes issues for video. You got to keep and so everything was set up to keep those systems. So therefore you want to be, if 0 is the maximum you can do, then you have to come down from that in order to have a broadcastable signal.
Go ahead, Peter.
Two things. Roscoe, you just brought me back to my freshman RF engineering course 40 some odd years ago, but any industry has its lingo and jargon and measurements. And I would answer her question. Yes, it was designed to confuse civilians. Because I know my industry, data center design and computer design, trust me, we have our own set of acronyms and measurements and values and things like that.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, Daniel Goldstein from Washington, D.C. says, what's an economical way to send 5 or 6 comm-grade bidirectional audio channels over public internet using computers we already have on either end, probably with Dante Virtual Sound Card? And he notes specifically only one computer on each end.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, Tucker.
Call Tucker.
Guy
some
is
people call it.
showing-
Some people call it Unity. We call it Tucker.
Yeah, some people call it. Guy is showing the Unity interface right now. If you want to show that, Unity will allow you to do 6 channels, and I'm assuming you could have a different computer logged into each channel and pull from that.
Yep. And you can use,
on
you
your
know,
own.
it will do. So Unity will let you do Android, iPhone, your iPad, and also your PC or Mac. So anyone can be on that, and then have it built up in the cloud. And you can definitely do it on your own with Unity, but it's just easier to call Tucker. So it's not going to be much more expensive, and you'll feel silly if you try to do it yourself. And you can find Tucker on Discord. All right, next question.
Michael Marsh is coming to us location free this morning, and he says, "Hey all, been tuning in for a couple of weeks and I'm new to the Discord. Why the new link every day, and what's the Discord used for except as an archive of topic chats? What's going on there while office hours is happening?"
Well, we put the Discord link out so that people can join it. We put Discord out in the morning, the Discord link out in the morning, and only have it last for a little bit of time, so that it really is people who are dedicated to being in Discord show up at least once to get in. So it kind of creates a little bit of a speed bump. And so that allows people to decide whether they really care about being in Discord or not. Almost 1,000 have said that they did. So there's a lot of people that are in there. Discord really builds a link between the shows. So you'll see us referring back to Discord all the time, it's a lot more than just keeping records of the chat. There's entire conversations going on there about all the things that we talk about here. People are having a lot of individual conversations back and forth. People are, discussing stuff. We're planning things. We're organizing things, and so it's where this community resides when we're not here in video. Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, lost my mouse for a second there. Yeah, the other thing in response to his questions, like what do we use it for while office hours is happening? A lot of times Mickey will use it during the show itself after we've done mic checks to send back channel messages to the panelists, like turn up your little low, turn up your mic 2 or 3 dB, or we're having a problem with your background or some other problem, something you don't want to interrupt the panel with, but send a communication, because if you have it up while the show is running, it'll ping you and it'll light up, and you can see that there's a message waiting for you, and you can check it.
And and again, in the greater sense of things, in the subject matters that are there's usually 130 people or so there all the time, interacting, and you can ask a lot of questions, and within a day, you usually get an answer, within it. So it's a pretty powerful platform. It's grown into something that's pretty useful for our group, both to organize what we're doing, but to talk about all these subjects. I mean, we can only cover so much in 2 hours a day. So this is where we spend the rest of the time talking about it. Hosmuk?
Yeah, I'm implementing Discord for this medical event, and we've had over 90 registrations, and the conversation and discussions are taking a furious pace like you can't believe.
Yeah. Next question.
TJ Asher of Minneapolis, normally here in the panel. Oh, TJ's missing today. I need to host a one-time 2-hour Zoom meeting in a week. There will be 10 people. I only have a free account, which is limited to 40 minutes. Any options, or should I just pony up for the $15 for a 1 month to get a longer meeting? Go ahead, Chuck.
I was going to say, reach out to a couple of us that have business accounts, and we might be able to work something out.
Yeah, if you want to save the $15, I would just spend the $15 and do it. but if you want to save the $15, there's a lot of us with a lot of accounts. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, another funny thing is that if you know somebody with a Zoom room, when the Zoom room enters somebody's meeting that has a free account, it'll say this meeting has been upgraded to unlimited minutes.
Does that mean if you own a portal and you jump in?
It doesn't work with the portal.
So we're always looking at the angle there. What were you going to say, Dan?
Just that I've reached out to a rep and they'll give it to you for 7 days or 14 days, or if you need to do it.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say, I never host meetings on my home computer. I always host them on my work computer just for stability. So that's the other reason to maybe use someone else.
Yep. Next question.
Victor from the panel here and Brookings, South Dakota says, I have an unused RJ11 and a cable coax phone connection in a room in rooms on the house. Is there a way that I can turn those RJ11 or coax cables into RJ45 in order to install satellite hotspots?
Depending on how the cable is produced, you can take the Ethernet cable, and you can connect it to the phone cable and pull it from one side to the other, and just replace it with a real cable. Anyway, go ahead, Peter.
Use it as a fish line.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, because the reality is telephone cables, even though they have, particularly the old style, if it's an older home, have more than enough conductors in them, because of the way the house is wired, it's not point to point, and that's what you need for Ethernet. Right?
Yeah. I think that you'd want to. I would try to use them as a fishing line to pull them through the house, but they may be a fix that someone may have nailed them. Use little.
Or in my case, when I discovered is when they drilled the hole through the 2x4s to run the phone line. It was the size of the hole they drilled was insufficient for properly jacketed Ethernet cable.
The one thing that we've all learned is that one of the things that you should always think about for your house is conduit. If you're building a house, you're building a new location, conduit is your friend.
I put conduit in when I remodeled the house 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I even put conduit from the second floor to the first floor. So that was a real interesting exercise.
Yeah.
Half inch, 1 inch? How big?
Hey, if it was me, I would do 3 inches.
I did. So I used a technique that somebody told me, and they're called, some people call them Smurf tubes, which are, they take a tennis ball. They're the size of a tennis ball. And so you can hook your wire to the tennis ball, hook a vacuum to the other end, and pull the sucker through. And that's what, so if you go into my attic, you've got an octopus of those blue things coming down into.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it works perfectly.
That's great. Okay, I learned something new today. All right, next question.
Moving on, Aaron Wetzel of Des Moines, Iowa says, currently we use the Teradek video unit.
Vidu. It's
Vidu. Oh, that's an interesting word. As I understand it, the Vidu Go unit does not do RTMP only. Can you confirm, is there a better encoder you can recommend?
Yeah, so I think it's an older encoder, so it's definitely not going to support RTMP-S. It's just that was a newer protocol that was, I think, now required by Facebook and is being required in more places. There's a couple different things that you can use that'll do RTMP-S. It depends on whether the video, as I remember it, is a cellular-based encoder. So if you want to do cellular, you're going to need to, if you're looking for a better cellular, that's a whole different puzzle. If you're just looking for a better encoder, the ones under, that are inexpensive, but I think solid are Clearcasters and the Elemental Lives. The Elemental, the Elemental Links and the Clearcasters, in my opinion, under $5,000 are probably the two best hardware encoders. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, a direct replacement could be the LiveView Solo, which does something similar to the Video Go, and it does RTMP. It goes to Facebook as well, so you can use that and it does bonding, with the Video Go does as well. So you can give it one Ethernet, one Wi-Fi, and 2 cell modems. And it's about, I think Guy has one, I believe.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
I do have one, but I was going to recommend something different if you just don't want to spend spend a little bit of money. The Teradek, the original one, the Video. I call it the Video. Maybe it is.
I could be wrong.
Anyhow, you can send it up to Core, Teradek's Core service, or you can send it up to Restream.io, and even though it goes up RTMP, you can then shoot it to Facebook via RTMP-S. And that way, yeah. But yesterday, Restream went down for a little bit on Facebook, so a lot of people lost a lot of streams yesterday, and so that, I don't know about recommending Restream as much as I used to. Having
it only takes
not
one
only
of
did
those.
it go down, not only did it go down, it wiped out previous posts too. So if you used it to go in, it took out previous posts. So people that had links going in, it was pretty bad. So I'm not sure if they fixed it, but that was a major thing yesterday. And let's see, yeah, and then the Video Go does do RTMPS. So that's the
and to get back,
upgraded unit.
and if you wanted to roll your own, if you want more scale at some point, we're going to be bringing I've been talking to the folks at AWS. We're going to bring those guys in to talk more about the infrastructure of Media Live and Media Connect. And the big thing is that I'm going to keep on recommending using something like that to roll your own. Restream's really easy, as is a lot of other services, but you're going to hit a ceiling really quickly of what you can do. If you start using lots of these little events to train yourself it's a little harder at the beginning, but if you start training yourself to use the AWS infrastructure or Azure or whatever you want to use, you're going to, as you keep on adding things you want to do, you can keep on adding things, whereas you're not limited by a general purpose, service. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, and the other important thing to remember there is that the newer ones can do H.265, which is highly efficient. So it's half the bandwidth of H.264, but YouTube won't take that direct. So you do have to spit it up to a service first. And that's one of the big things about something like the Zixi service is it is a high efficient codec as well. So you get out of those really low bandwidth places, or if you're in cellular where you're only getting like 2 or 3 meg up, you can still get full HD. So something to keep in mind.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Rob Greenlee of Norwalk. Does anyone else use a teleprompter with a small camera monitor like a Lilliput?
And Rob, you're using the Lilliput right now with a teleprompter? Did you?
Yeah, I am.
Build it?
What's that?
Did you build it, or is it how are you? What are you using with the Lilliput for the teleprompter?
Oh, it's just a 12-inch one that I bought off of Amazon. It's a
Was it designed
generic
for an iPad? Like an iPad one
from China? Yeah.
So it doesn't have, but it didn't have the monitor. You're using the Lilliput for the.
Correct. Correct. And then I can drag things into the monitor. Actually, I use it more for just doing, like Zoom calls like this.
Yep.
So, and then I got a switcher that I can switch between camera view as well as my computer view. So.
What switcher are you using?
It's actually what's the name of it? It's the ZetaGuard 3-input switcher.
Right.
So it supports the HDMI ports.
Right. Yep. Yeah. We actually have printed teleprompters for the Lilliputs specifically. I think that the 7 or the 10-inch Lilliput has a 1/4-20 on the side and a 1/4-20 on the end, on the top. And so what we did is we designed one that was basically we could print either side, and then we used that back one to kind of secure it, as well as put it off to the side. And it basically had a groove for glass that went down. And what the nice thing about it was you could take it off, fold it over, and put it in your backpack. And so if you're mobile in a hotel, you could just pop it up, screw it in, and you'd have an instant little teleprompter for eye-to-eye communication. So the Lilliputs are great for that, and because it has, I only wish it had a one on the other side. So we were, anyway. So or we could buy a cage for it, but they're great little monitors for that.
Yeah, I kind of wish I could have a larger one. The screen size I have right now is about a 9-inch screen.
Right.
But it'd be great if you could have one of these things like a 25-inch or something like that.
I mean, so that you can buy them that big. I mean, of course, ProPrompter makes
expensive,
24.
really expensive.
They're expensive. The thing to always remember about teleprompters, I've built teleprompters all over the world without being able to order them. It's a silvered glass at 45 degrees. Like, as long as you remember that it's silvered glass at 45 degrees, I built them with C-stands. I think we talked about here, the largest one I think I've built is like a 70-inch teleprompter. And we loaded that one into the White House.
Wow. Okay.
Carrying that much glass with 2 people, you're like, if this breaks, it's going to slice my wrist in half. Anyway, so so the thing is that we build all kinds of stuff. So if I want a bigger one, like when I had to build one in Zimbabwe, and we just found a place that had the silvered glass found the right silvered glass for buildings, had them cut it out for us. And then we just built something that propped it up, and we had a teleprompter. And we oftentimes make them bigger because when we're doing training, sometimes I want like a 55-inch monitor with a big, teleprompter. For another corporate client, we built it so that it was all hydraulic. So you just push a button and the whole thing would come up and, show a big monitor, and you could talk to folks and everything else. You just roll it into the room and turn it on and it would come up. so there's a lot of options there. As long when you get down to the atomization of it, it doesn't really. It's just a monitor with a. The nice thing about it is making sure the monitor can do horizontal flip. So
yeah, exactly. That's key. Yeah, because you don't want to see
exactly.
things upside down, right?
Yeah, go ahead, you're gonna say Courtney, and then Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have something external to do horizontal flip, sorry, I blocked my microphone. I found these portable monitors, like this is a 15-inch. You can see how thin and light that is. It's a 1080p panel, IPS panel, and they're about $125. And they take USB-C or HDMI input. But unfortunately, they do not do monitor flip, and you have to come up with your own mounting. I have some dual link Velcro on the back that sticks mine on. And I use this, my output of my ATEM Mini Pro, so I can see my multi-view on this, which I had to unplug to do this. But yeah, so that works, but you're going to have to use an MDHX or something to flip it horizontal if you're going to use it in a teleprompter.
Yeah, and for my teleprompter at home, I'm actually adding, I know this will be absurd, but I'm adding an ATEM Mini to be my switcher for my teleprompter at home, because there was enough things that I needed to do that it became this thing where I had a KVM for it and I was kind of switching it, but I was like, I just want a switcher that switches the HDMI. And then I want to be able to put stuff over top of it. So I want to be able to key notes and so on and so forth over top of it. And then I started adding it up and I was like, well, it's $300. So I'm just going to have an 8. And then the big thing is that I can control it with anything I want. So rather than having any switches with the ATEM, if I do it for my own teleprompter, I can have a Stream Deck or something else that I can just tap things and I can redesign what it does and when it does it, even programmatically. So I've been playing around with having it do some stuff automatically because it can make calls to the ATEM. Go ahead, Bill, and then Rob.
So this is my setup, and the big monitor, if I look at the big monitor, and you're not seeing me right now in my regular shot, but let me just show you. If I look at the big monitor, I'm looking up to heaven. And so I like the fact that I'm using a small Lilliput right there. That's actually the source of it, and the mirror's right in front of me. And the point of that is that I have very little eye travel if I'm reading something off of that, or if I'm interacting with a person, I'm looking straight at their face. I think if I got too much bigger, I could probably go a little bit larger in the prompter monitor, but too much, and you start getting that uncomfortable back and forth reading left to right that I think makes you look shifty. So I actually like the small ones.
What was that physical size, Bill?
It is, this unit is the one that I got. It's a couple $100. It is not, and I'm going to repeat this 2 times, it is not something I would travel with for field use. It is made of plastic. It is perfectly okay for a fixed installation. The hinge is okay, but everything is made of plastic. So I think if I was collapsing it and taking it out in the field over and over, I would not feel good about its longevity. But for a fixed installation where it's never going to move, it's fine.
The monitor size? The monitor size?
Lilliput, I think it's a 9-inch.
Yeah, go ahead.
9 or 10, something like that.
Courtney and then Guy, real quick. We're going to move on.
Just one thing to mention, that make sure your monitor that you're using, whether it's a Lilliput or what I showed you, has enough resolution. If you're going to be able to try and click on something or type something, it's got to have enough resolution to display a web page so that you can easily click on it.
Yep, go ahead, Guy. Yes. Oh, there we go. And the one challenge with that, Guy, is that your monitor, of course, is bigger than your teleprompter. I can't hear you though. You're muted, Guy.
Oh, I get enough side on the side so that I can throw extra stuff up instead of just having the person down the middle. But yeah, I do get like my mute is cut off in the bottom left unless I move the screen over. But yeah.
There's that. Go ahead, Rob, last words.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, you could probably mount that Lilliput on top of your camera. So let's say you have a DSLR or something like that, and it probably wouldn't be too far. I mean, your eye view wouldn't be too far different from it. So, I mean, that's typically how these monitors are used, right? They're mounted to the top of the camera and just facing you. So I suppose you could probably do that and it mostly get there, I guess.
And it depends on what you're whether you're using a webcam or not either. So one of the things that we did with teleprompters is, and I've shown it before, I might have trouble finding it immediately, but we took a C920, which we would use a Brio right now, and we literally vacuum formed it into behind the glass. So then it was just an arm that you pulled up, and the C920 was actually embedded, with it, and just vacuum formed in. And so now there's no gobbledygook on the back. You just open it up and it has it has a teleprompter and a camera. It worked really well. Next question.
Moving on to Alex L.
Oh, that guy. I don't even know if we should listen to his question.
Well, let's try another time. From Novato, California. Does anyone have experience with Native Instruments Complete with a K? What are your thoughts?
Does anyone use that? I think I just got an email about it. It's on sale right now. And I was like, should I get that? Go ahead, Greg.
You want to make some music?
I do. I do want to make some music.
Then get it.
Can you explain a little bit of what it is? I kind of looked at it. It's like, is it a bunch of, it's just musical samples? What is it looked like it had a lot of processing.
Well, there's the whole, if you look at the whole family and a lot of the outboard gear and stuff like that, you'll go crazy. You won't have time for office hours. But it's a lot of samples, and there's various synthesizer models, subtractive, additive, all kinds of different stuff. Mickey puts it very succinctly. Complete is like the waves of virtual instruments.
Got it. Okay.
He just typed that in. So the samples, they have very, very high quality symphonic samples. They're the horn packs are great. Really, really, really good stuff.
I have to admit, in the level of my daughter works very hard. I put her to work as a model for one of my, or as an actor for one of my shows. One of the things I was working on, and she worked really hard on it. And I promised her a keyboard, so she's gonna get an S88. So she's and she plays a lot. Like I'm not handing her something she's not using. She plays the bass probably a couple hours a day, and then she plays the keyboard another hour a day. So and she already knows Logic. She's 11, as 11-year-olds do now. And so I've been kind of wondering whether I should make that part of the instrument pack. Then I'm going to put her to work doing all the music. I'll do some of the music, but she'll do most of it. All right. Next question.
Chuck Wojak of Concord, California says, what's the easiest way to tell someone with no Photoshop experience to make lower thirds with an alpha for a media pool on an ATEM Mini to use in a downstream key? Keynote, PowerPoint, Canva?
So they're not using Photoshop.
Well, I'm trying to come up with a way that people can easily create stuff like this. This one was actually just exported from After Effects. But I'm trying to come up with a way. I'm
and
trying to train people how to use.
Are they Mac based?
They're both. They're PC and Mac. And I was wondering if there's an easy way to do it with like PowerPoint or even just.
We had talked about it a little bit a couple days ago. Peter, I'll let you jump in and then we'll come back.
Well, I discovered. Before the session a couple days ago, I had discovered a while back that if I use the downstream keyer with the chroma key, if I just I cheated. I made the background of my slide green and told the chroma key to take the chroma.
The reason we want to do it this way is because they're already using, like for instance, I'm already using my keyer, so the keyer's out of the question.
Well, then you said the downstream key.
Well, the other issue. So I recommend against green screen, and I used it for years. So I used green screen for years. The reason that I don't use green screen now, unless I have to, so like with Chuck's, you can Luma key that or green screen it because of that logo, because there's no black levels in it. So without black levels, you can do a Luma key, and the reason that you want to do that is that your switcher is a 422 switcher, which means that the chroma is half the resolution of the image. And the problem with that is that you now have, you'll get stair stepping along curves. So if you look at a lower third that you do with chroma, and you look at any curves and on those little bits, you're going to notice that there's stair stepping on it. If you look at it really closely, you'll see this little stair stepping because it's the color that you're keying is half resolution. If you do Luma, you're going to get finer edges going around that if you can pull it off. And so there are times when you have to use chroma, but I will say that if you can put a graphic up with Luma, it will look better on the edges than it will on chroma because of that. Until switchers are 444 internally, you're going to have that issue. And it's hard for me to tell over Zoom, but it may not matter over Zoom as far as lower thirds. But if you actually look at that graphic closely, along that G, for instance, that you're showing there, Peter, you'll probably see a little bit of stair stepping there that wouldn't occur on a Luma. Go ahead, Sky.
I'd be curious to exercise with you Canva, because it's hardware ubiquitous. It allows anybody to do some amazing things, and there's like tens of thousands of little clips and additional bits and pieces, and it exports out the different variety of things that could possibly work. So I'm going to connect with you on Discord. I'd love to exercise with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I moved past that anyhow. I'm using Memo Live for all of my lower thirds and stuff at this point. So
right. Courtney?
Yeah.
One thing you might look at is something called Here to Record, or H2R Graphics, and you can download it. It's cross-platform, works on Linux, Windows, and Mac OS, and it is designed specifically for generating lower thirds. It generates, you launch the program, it generates a separate window, and you just tell it the name and so on. It uses templates to insert the lower thirds. And
yeah, I'm recommending those. This is for people who want to preload them into the media player pool, and then I can show them how with the Stream Deck to set up buttons to just call them up.
Yeah,
and that way they're not using their computer to run any other programs. It's done pre-show.
The thing that's worth the time, and I'd have to go back and do some work on some scripting to get the scripting working. What we did, what's worth a little bit of time, if you have somebody that can do a little scripting for you, if you're gonna have a lot of people do this and you want to make it easy, what you want to do is script Photoshop. What we did is built a Photoshop script that just looked at the database, looked at an Excel file. You just load it in. It said, give me an XLS, loads it in, or CSV, I think, loads it in and just populates. And I think that, and it did it in Photoshop. Use the scripting in Photoshop to basically populate it and send it to the switcher. So literally, if you sent it, if you gave them a list of 32 things, it would fill all 32 windows with the things. You didn't have to do anything. So there's work at the beginning of writing that, of figuring out that script. And I didn't write the script, and I don't have it anymore. We haven't needed to do it for a while because we have other graphics packages. But when I was doing it in Photoshop a decade ago, what we were doing, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, what we would do is we would have it, it would look at that CSV, it would stick it in there, and it would just populate them all. And I think we had one more channel, which is we had a window that said, what is the, which pool slot do you want to put it in? Was in there. And so, and literally, and we didn't try to edit any of them in Photoshop. We had one folder that had the base lower third, there's John Smith, Acme, whatever. And it would just replace that text and then actually use the plugin and just push it straight to the switcher. And the reason we had to do that was because we were going from one session to another specifically at Dreamforce. so we were one session from another, and we had to just have a whole new set of speakers instantly, and so we would just push it in and then it all pop up, and then you'd immediately go to the next show. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one other place to check, Chuck, is the Facebook Live producer section. So if you just go into Facebook, make a post, hit live, hit graphics, and then copy the URL where it's sending that graphic to, and check and see what file that is, because you might be able to just have Facebook Live producer produce the lower thirds and then grab that graphic and save it as whatever, because it is transparent.
For Mac users, and the reason we showed it over a couple of days ago is for Mac, or Wednesday, for Mac users with no money, simple to use, want lots of features, is Keynote. like teach them how to do it in Keynote. So and set your background in Keynote to transparent.
And then can you export that as a PNG?
You can export it as a PNG. You can export that as a ProRes 444.
Oh, you can. Oh,
yeah. So if you want the animation,
my Mac users are.
For the Mac user, that's the key to the operation. Next question.
Our friend Jonas Dottell of Reutlingen, Germany is back with, does the normal ATEM Mini send H.264 or motion JPEG via USB?
Go ahead, Steve, and then Guy.
I believe the USB out of the ATEM Mini is H.264. That comes out of that.
I think it's actually MJPEG. Go ahead, Guy.
Oh.
Yeah, it shows up in mine as a pop-up for MJPEG. When it actually appears, it says MJPEG as a selectable source.
Next question. We're going to kind of move quickly because we're
Patrick Shones, it looks like, of Little Rock, Arkansas. Does anyone have a favorite?
Let's move that one. That one's good for the second hour. So make sure to tag those questions if you ask them If they're best for the second hour, make sure to tag them a second hour because it's OSC. Go ahead. Next question.
Sure. Moving on to Tyler Roberts of Chambersburg. What services aggregate Facebook and YouTube and web comments to one central place? Have a small event that would like to stream multiplayer platforms and have interaction with. Familiar with Restream.io chat, but curious what their options are.
I believe that I don't know why that it just
Streaming.
Sorry.
StreamYard, was that the one that was you were trying to think of?
StreamYard will aggregate comments if you're streaming from those services to that. It'll aggregate those comments. And that's the other publicly available one.
How are we dancing around this?
I have a tool that does it, but we don't have. That's not. We're letting people look at Makana for a little while. Our tool is really tweaky. The one that we use for backends, it'll grab as many. It doesn't care where you're streaming from. That's the big difference with our tool. It just says, well, how many Twitter handles do you want to use, and what YouTube events and what Facebook events, and then it compiles them all together. And anyone who's seen the back end of Makana looks pretty much the same. And so it just processes the comments, throws them to tickers, all that stuff. And so we have a tool to do it, and we'll make it more available to everyone in the near future. But right now, it's mostly that the permissions with all these organizations is so complicated and so messed up. It's half the reason you use Makana is just to avoid having to use the comment engines for these platforms, which stink. Anyway, next question
is from Rob Greenlee again from Norwalk, and he has an interesting one. Ideally, do you guys think closer and larger head and face view sizes are better? In other words, I'm out of focus, but bigger head or smaller head? I guess that's what he's looking
Greg.
For a frame size, larger head, absolutely. One of the cardinal rules in dramatic production is that the reason we have close-ups is all the emotion is in the face, and it's good to see people's faces, and you can tell a lot about them, and you feel closer to them. I think you're more engaged when the person is closer and not farther away.
Did you have another question related to that, Rob? It looked like you were ready to ask something else.
Yeah, I was just, I guess it's really kind of a psychology question, I guess, is what it was really of ideally, I've been playing around with, the zoom on my camera and just trying to get a ballpark idea. I kind of, maybe I'm prioritizing my background more than I should, I guess that was the
You
core,
can see that I think the backgrounds
question.
are really important. As you can see that I think that, really expressing myself with my background is really important.
It's not.
so here's a couple things. A couple things about it that are technical. The simpler your background. So Zoom is a constant bit rate, right? So it's a CBR at 3.25 megabits per second. If you make a simple background, it has more bits for you. So the more complex your background is behind you, the less bits it's spending on the speaker or on the subject in the center, because it's got to spend those, even though you're doing temporal compression, that temporal compression is partially defeated by, added detail that it has to manage. And so a complicated background behind you means that there's less bits for you. A complicated, anything moving behind you is a lot less bits for you. And as you're smaller, the thing is, as you're larger, it just gives it more in whatever resolution. Right now we are at 1080p Zoom, but we took us a lot of time to get there. And if you have to think about somebody watching at 640 by 360, when you're small, you're really small, and you're now getting down to pixels. So I have found that, I've obviously landed on this kind of head and shoulder is kind of the base thing that I want to start with. And again, that I've simplified my background. It's not a plain, gray background. You'll see a lot of us have these kind of lights that kind of give it a little bit of style to it. So there's a little bit of, but it is, it's not, there's nothing about it that is by accident. Go ahead, Bill. Except for the screw holes that everyone keeps on sending me comments. I know there are screw holes in the wall. I know that. I have to repaint the whole wall, or there'll be little dark marks. I tried it on another part of the wall. So if one more person discords me about the screw holes, it's the screw hole. They came with the room, and I haven't had time to I have to spackle them, and then I have to paint the whole wall again. And that's going to take me a day, and I just haven't done it yet. All right. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
To the part of Rob's question that was about the philosophy or psychology of this, I mean, we see a person at a distance and we're assessing them. This is, I think, down in the reptile brain. As you let someone closer and closer to you, that relationship becomes more intimate to the point when spouses and people, or just good friends, we're going to go up and hug them. That implies a trustworthiness that you don't get with the people you keep at arm's length. So I do think, and I think Hollywood has taken advantage of that, because in the big swooping romantic movies, when the couple at the heart of the story comes in for the kiss, the camera gets closer to them. And so I think that's just part of how we see things.
And from a cold math perspective, I can tell you that direct address at head and shoulder increases average view time, just flat out. Like, it's just from a pure math. How do you keep people on the screen? The better the quality of the audio is the number one thing that will keep people on the quality of the audio is number one thing that will keep them there. Quality of the conversation obviously is important, but head and shoulder, like what I'm doing, we've done events that are almost identical with different framing on purpose. And I can tell you that the head and shoulder version of it is about 30%, 30% more, so it's a much more, it's a much, from a pure, like, just how do you keep people on? Next question. We're going to move on. We're running late. We're going to run heavy just a little bit, and then we'll jump into OSC. Go ahead.
Michael Vosbein, Woodstock, Georgia, is next. With Mac security settings seem to offer applications either access to all connected USB cameras or to none. I want to disable the Mac internal eyesight camera so that it doesn't appear as an option in Zoom when switching through the connected USB with my Stream Deck. Possible?
I think it's all or none. I don't think it's. I think that the easiest way that I would use gaff tape. Like, gaff tape is. I mean, that's what you'd be surprised at some executives that I've worked at that you walk into their office and they have gaff tape over their thing, and they have a 1/8" jack that goes nowhere into their headphone settings. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, no, I think I get what he's trying to do, because we've tried to do it for a couple of clients from the remote end, is allow them to plug in a couple C920s and be able to use the Zoom camera switching to switch between those cameras.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't want, like, if their laptop's down here, they don't want that all of a sudden to go to the undershot, or
right.
If they tape it, to go to a black. And because the switching already takes a little bit of time. I was able to do it on a PC. I've never gotten it to work on a Mac to disable the internal camera. The only thing I would say is try using a Mac Mini and plug in USB webcams that way.
Yeah,
that would be the easiest.
I find that the internal webcam on the Mac is so useless that I wish I could just turn it off and have it not considered as an option. Anyway, next question.
Well, it was a question from Paul Wallace, but it was for Rob Greenlee, and I think he just left, so I don't think we can ask him.
We lost Rob just before we were about to ask him a question.
Yeah, so let's move on to Jim Wilkins of Marblehead, Massachusetts. Anyone know about RSP streaming protocol? Any options on how it compares to RTMP? My church uses the Resi streaming encoder, which uses RSP.
Go ahead, Chuck.
You're going to get some great buffering, but you're going to have really long delays. It's going to fill up its own buffer before it delivers. So I use ProPresenter, and I've tried both streaming direct to YouTube, and then I've done the trial with the Resi. It's really good for delivery, but don't expect audience interaction unless you plan for the delay.
And again, one of the things that you'll find is that if you're able to use a platform that separates comments from questions, your buffer time, your delay means almost nothing. I mean, you look at these questions that were asked a half an hour ago. So it is when chat and questions are merged is when you really have to pay attention to that's why you're trying to get to low latency. Low latency matters when that happens. And when you're trying to have a conversation, and I think that you're trying to use the tool for something that's not built for. Next question.
Moving on, this comes from Scott Wasserman. Scott asks, from Detroit, just watching the Focus on Teleprompters office hours from October, love the idea of putting a teleprompter on a rolling stand to easily move it around and align it in front of the camera. I have an ICANN 15-inch teleprompter. Recommendations for rolling stands and adapters to mount it separate from the camera.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I know the medical industry has a lot of rolling carts that they use in hospitals. I'm wondering if that might be a possible concept.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Avenger does a lot of stands, and they have a collapsible rolling. Now, the old ones had a little wider base, and I like the new ones because they're easier to transport. They're still reasonably heavy on those rolling wheeled stands, but the base is shorter, so they're a little less stable. So I like those smaller ones, but I would definitely use a sandbag with them. But it's just a basic C stand, but with collapsible rolling legs and wheels.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you might look around for a VESA adapter that has some time of quarter 20 on the bottom of it, and 75 millimeter or 100 millimeter VESA adapter to go on the back of the monitor, and then the monitor, if the monitor supports the rest of the teleprompter, do it that way. And or you can use something like this, as I use this on all my teleprompters. I just drill and tap a 3/8 inch hole in the bottom of the VESA adapter, and then this goes on top of any 5/8 inch stand. So then you can use any kind of rolling light stand and drop it on top, and this holds it just fine.
The best one that I've seen so far was a 1/2 inch plate that was approximately, I think it was like 30 inches in diameter, maybe 24 inches diameter. It was a beast, really heavy. And then it had 3 casters on the bottom, the circular casters that'll go any direction that they want to. Then it had a pole, and then they mounted a tripod head on, fluid head on the top. And it was in some studio that I looked at it, and I thought I took pictures of it, but I couldn't find it right now. But it was kind of the most amazing thing ever. Like, it's just heavy. It doesn't want to go anywhere, and it rolls anywhere. But what it doesn't do very well is go over cables. So that was the only thing that we had to be kind of careful of. Is it was heavy, and it was hard to get over cables, but it on a general studio set, it worked really well.
I found the one I use. It's this, and so they're a couple $100 a piece. And Avenger, Impact, and Matthews has them. They'll be more expensive, probably a little better built actually.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Auto price $70 has a stand. It's a TV stand, but it has a shelf where you put the VCRs and the DVDs. VCRs, that's an old one. DVDs and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Put the link in.
Perfect. Next question.
Michael March is in with what's a good resource in Northern California to sell used tape decks, Digibeta, DVCam, and the recycler?
Ping. Okay, the person you want to ping is Marty Brennis in Discord. He knows a guy. Everybody knows a guy, and if Marty was here, he would tell us what it was. But there's a guy in the South Bay that collects decks. And if you need a deck, if you need to use a deck or whatever, he rents the decks, he sells the decks, but he buys the decks. And I just can't think of his name off the top of my head, but ping Marty Brennis in the Discord, and he should be able to give you the link to the guy that does the thing. It's the guy. He knows a guy. He knows a guy in the South Bay, and everybody uses the same guy or to buy and sell those systems. And it's always like, oh, I need a 1/2 inch, or 3/4 inch transfer. He's the guy because he works on them. Like, he rebuilds them, pulls them apart. He knows more about it. We'll see. I'll talk to Marty. I'll get his contact. We should bring him on. Like, that would be fun to have him.
You need to say that with more Jersey accent.
I know a guy.
Knows a guy.
He knows a guy. Yeah. All right. Next question.
Does a thing.
A. Mitchell's up next from Washington. Is it worthwhile having the extra quick mic check before the second hour for those lighting and control system people who couldn't be here before the first hour began?
Yeah, I'd be happy to add those folks. Oh, there's Andrew. Yeah, if anybody wants to jump into the lighting and control one for the second hour, just raise your hand. We're going to go ahead and do that. When we have these ones, and I think that we're going to be we're going to start being a little bit more flexible for people that are already well known. So that's great. Hey, Andy, good to see you. Let's do the last, again, if you're a lighting control, if you know OSC, if you want to talk about it, jump into the, raise your digital hand, and we'll bring you in, and we'll ask the last question here real quick.
We have Henry Ramos from Yonkers, New York. Any legit online sources for discounted copies of Windows? Forgot one that I just retrieved. These off the expired lease laptops or business PCs that were disposed of.
I don't know anything about that. Anyway, Chuck, and then Andy.
I usually say just go to a reputable dealer, Newegg, Tiger Direct, something like that, and get a license from there, because you can possibly find others, but I wouldn't necessarily trust them.
Yeah.
And we had a late arrival. Do you want to do this or not?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and do this last one.
Okay, Lars Swenson from Tolhatten. I think that's Norway. Might be Denmark. I don't know. We'll have a Zoom meeting soon. Can I use my Sennheiser AVX connected to an ATEM Mini Pro ISO and internal speakers without problems with sound? And since I use the AVX system, generally, yes, you can use the little XLR to Mini 3.5-inch connector and connect it directly in there. That's for the receiver into the ATEM. But the ATEM, when you get that sound in, often has a delay. So study up on the ATEM Mini about setting the delay for that, because the Mini will have an audio delay.
Great. And let's go ahead and do a real quick mic check with Andy, just to make sure that everything's working there.
Okay. Stand by a second. Andy, go ahead and dive in.
Hello, everybody from the Washington, D.C. area. I'm really looking forward to talking about OSC today and how we use it both in our apps and other things that we've done.
You're good.
You're perfect.
And Tlaloc, are you going to join us with, let's see if you can turn your video and audio on. He's there. He's kind of working on it there. Oh, he's gone. There he goes. All right, so we'll if Tlaloc, if you can hear us and you want to come back in, we know that you're an expert in this area, so we'd love to have you back. So hopefully he'll jump back in. All right, so let's go ahead and here he comes. He's connecting to audio. Slowly.
Drum roll.
On his phone somewhere.
Yeah, he's thinking about it. Maybe.
Or his provider, his ISP.
While we're waiting for him, Andy, why don't you describe a little bit of OSC for everyone?
Yeah, and I
What
think
is OSC?
we've got a lot of knowledge in this group about things like MIDI, so I'll start with that sort of frame of reference. Just in the same way as MIDI sort of began with audio, OSC is very similar. And just like MIDI evolved into show control, OSC also has sort of followed that path. The big difference between the two is that OSC is a network protocol. It talks over the Ethernet, whereas MIDI is sort of more of a serial thing. And it's now used both. Some folks are still using it for sound related applications, but I find that actually it's much more commonly used in control environments, and particularly in inter-program communication, and at the software level.
And how would you distinguish OSC we had the great talk with DMX last week. How would you distinguish it from DMX?
Well, I think DMX is great for hardware to hardware, and it's used very specifically in lighting. With OSC, I see it more as a triggering routine or a way of transmitting sort of undefined data. It's very, very organized as a protocol, whereas DMX is sort of, you have this constant stream of these full frames of a certain number of addresses, right? So OSC is in a certain sense less chatty when it's not communicating something, versus DMX that's always communicating everything. But there's no particular definition for what OSC has to communicate. You can choose to organize it and put payloads in it and set it up however you want. Whereas DMX, you're following a certain procedure.
Now, is there a certain kind of frame rate or update frequency that goes on with OSC, or is it kind of free floating?
It's just a UDP protocol. So it when you're using it that way, yeah, it would comply with that kind of standard for your, just like a video transmission.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
OSC versus ArtNet. If you could.
So ArtNet's sort of an IP wrapper for DMX. The thinking with OSC is that it's funny to compare them, because I think that they're used for different purposes. And while you can get DMX over IP, that's great for DMX enabled applications. For me, the way I organize it in my head is that DMX is going to be used when I have hardware mixers, or I guess a emulator of a hardware device going to hardware fixtures. And I use OSC when I have software controllers talking to other pieces of software, or if I have sometimes the reverse of that, a physical emulation of a software device talking to other pieces of software.
Tlaloc?
So one use case was working on a show where I wanted control remotely of cameras, and being able to send a command that says, I want camera 1, I want camera 2. And because OSC is so open, it allows you to just create protocols that you create anything, really any command you want to create. And so that's what's so different between it and DMX, because DMX is literally only a 0 to 255 kind of, you know, in 512 channels. And OSC, you say, I want to, you know, start brewing the coffee, and you call that channel brew the coffee, you know, and so you can
So
really
you can send
make it
anything down, any command. It doesn't have to be numbers. It doesn't have to be anything else. It's just, you're just sending actual commands. You're not trying to figure out how do I create something that sends that command and look for that number. You just send it.
Yeah, and so like for the cameras, you know, with 10 remotes and switching cameras, I just called it cam 1, cam 2, and then I could give it, you know, channels, and so there's other, you can layer channels onto it and then really do a lot of work with it. You kind of have to have a program. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but you have to have something to work with it. You know, maybe it's Touch OSC, maybe it's Isadora, maybe it's QLab. And like, for example, another thing I did is I had a heartbeat. Andy, help me with this. I had a heartbeat coming from my media server in case it crashed that would switch to a trouble slide automatically on the ATEM. So you can also send commands to the ATEM with OSC. So it's just a very powerful.
Well, and how is it? Because it's just, and using, how does it get to the ATEM from what you're doing? How does the ATEM get the
I was using a little translator in Mac that I don't remember the name. I'll put it in Makana or in the Discord. But it's just a little translator that listens to who's sending it and sends it to who wants to listen to it.
Right.
So.
And Andy, what are you showing there?
So I'd like to just show you how sort of an OSC packet is constructed so that we can speak in specificity about addresses and payloads. So what I have open here right now is a super zoomed in version of Isadora. So you can see this. This is the OSC multi-transmit. This is Isadora's way of constructing an OSC packet. And what I like about this interface is that it shows you exactly what piece is what part of the puzzle. So the first is the UDP address. This is your IP address right now. It's set to localhost 127.0.0.1. And then you have a port. 1234 for now. The way that an OSC packet is organized is it has a address and a series of payloads. Now, if you look at the specification, there's some other things in there that are part of the standard. There's, of course, the OSC UDP header. There's the address schema, but these are usually auto-generated by the program that you're sending it from. You usually don't send raw UDP. It usually is packaged by some helper application. So for this, if I wanted to say, slash office hours slash ask question, that might be my my address for such an inquiry as if I wanted to send a question. And then if I wanted to send the actual question's text, what I would do is I would pipe in some text into the argument. So there's an arbitrary number of values that you can choose to have following this payload. And these can be floats, these can be ints, these can be strings, and that's usually what you end up using. There's int 32 and int 64, but typically you don't have to get into that. And you can have any number of values that you want to have, and they can mix and match these different payloads. And then the receiving application will parse those back. And so for an application like Zoom OSC, if you send us somebody's username, we'll go find their username. If you send us their index in the gallery view as a number, we'll go find, that person from the gallery view. And you format your address a certain way, you format your payload a certain way, and then that tells us what you're trying to do so we can figure out what to do with the data you're sending us.
And then what I see. So those are, if you go back to that screen for a second, you're setting up that as a trigger, right? So when I see text, was that triggering it, or is that text, is that feeding it?
So in Isadora, there's a button here that's transmit, and I hit that to fire the packet, and this posts the packet on the network for me to be able to receive it.
But what goes into that packet is you can have a series of generators that are all going into those different fields, right? So you can have that text as one of those things. It's default.
Yeah, right now I have, so in Isadora is a node editor, so you could fill out, different parameters with generators, and have things like in our I'll pull up some other examples of Isadora files that I've used with OSC.
Right. But all of those, like, so all those little nodes on the left side of the multi-transmit, you, just for people who haven't used nodes before, you would basically have you could have a whole bunch of calculations or anything else going on that where you see trigger. All of those would feed the data into this transmit, and then it would send out that payload as one unit. It's what organizes all of those things. And you might want to show Andy like a different, but also it doesn't have to be text. It could be the calculation of something else. But the point is that it all gets packaged up by this. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it all gets packaged up by this transmit and sent as a single, kind of a single unit. Does that make sense?
That's right. It comes out as a single packet. And so, like, for example, if we were building an OSC integration from Mukana right now, and the idea was, you need to send an address to ask a question. Maybe your first field is the question text, and your second field is the person that you want to ask it to, or that asked it. So your packet would look something like this, where you have two payloads and then the address that specifies, what kind of function you're calling it on. And
Mukana on its end would just have to be listening for, it knows what it's expecting in value 1 and value 2, and it comes in and it formats it as it needs it.
Well, we should talk. We should have a longer conversation about how to parse it, because there's a lot of things to think about on that end too.
Okay. Talak?
So I just wanted to say that, there's all these different ways to use this. And so then you need to look at, I think Andy would call it the API, but how does a specific program that you use in your life use OSC, right? So for the ATEM, there's a list of channels of OSC, not channels, channels that will command different functions. And something I do, for example, with projection design, is I use OSC to connect the light board to Isadora to fire off projection cues. And so, I built that 6-7 years ago, and I just have this thing that I always use by looking at how does the light board send OSC commands, and I listen to it, and then I do something when that happens, when a particular thing happens.
Courtney?
Does it use XML or a specific schema to transmit its formatted data to the receiver so that it knows what order, what commands are arriving in what order, et cetera?
So there is if you peel back sort of the protocol, there's a thing that's usually hidden from the end user, which is it's actually a string that is the letters I, F, and S, and it's those characters in the sequence that the payload is supposed to be parsed. And so that gets transmitted along with every OSC packet following the header. There is this additional kind of hidden payload that's generated by the generating program that will tell the parser what order to pull off those different parameters.
So they're just delimiters in there that it puts in between the IF and S that you look for on the receiving end.
Right. So if you see an I first, go grab the N.
Parses it that way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's that, because so this protocol was written in 2002, and in Zoom OSC we actually used the original C implementation of OSC from back in the day, and that's how I know like how large the buffer needs to be to receive this payload. If I know I'm dealing with an int32 or an int64, I know how many bits to allocate to receive that part of the UDP packet. And that's really the beauty of OSC in general, is that it's just a more organized way of using UDP. It follows a specification and it organizes your data so that you on both ends can abstract that for the end user who might not be aware of all the things they need to do with UDP. And then for the programmer, it's beautiful because you have a nice library that will just deliver the values to you versus needing to build out something really robust and handshake and have all that communication.
Let's go ahead and jump into questions, Bill. Got a couple of them.
And Patrick Shonis of Little Rock, Arkansas is the first one in with, does anyone have a favorite OSC application for iPad? Wanting to park on iPad on the wall for janitors and volunteers to control some of our studio functions without access to the entire control room.
Go ahead, Andy.
On the iPad, Touch OSC is a favorite of mine. The way that it works is it lets you design any interface that you want visually, with sliders and buttons and knobs and anything that you want to create. And then you basically flash it onto the iPad, and it opens up as a controller. And in the settings software, you say, okay, I want this fader to send, /zoom/volume. And when I fade this fader up, I want it to go from 0 to 255. And then in the iPad, when you drag that fader up, it'll start emitting OSC packets to the IP that you specified. And it's a really beautiful way to build control surfaces. And we use it all the time.
That's great. Next question.
Moving on to...
Does anyone know anyone to touch OSC? It'd be kind of fun to bring somebody in. If anyone knows anybody, let me know. Next question.
Chuck Wojak of Concord, California is in with, are there easy to understand resources for learning OSC? Does QLab or Isadora make it more of a GUI-based process?
Go ahead, Andy.
As Talek said, it's the beauty of OSC is that the software that you want to use it with has implemented it for you. And so as the question sort of suggests, yes, your best strategy is to go look at the software that you'd like to use and see if it's OSC enabled, and then learn how it implements it. There are plenty of guides on both Isadora and QLab for how to implement an OSC control into that program. I'll show you the BitFocus companion real quick, because I know a lot of you use that. If I go back to my virtual input, this is the Zoom OSC preset, but really it's just the OSC implementation from BitFocus directly. So if I click on Zoom, or on pin 1, on the right-hand side of my screen, if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that it has two options: an OSC path, which is that same address that we saw earlier in Isadora, just located over here, and a value. In Zoom OSC, we kind of made this a little easier by making it so that you could specify what type of payload you wanted to send at what point. So when you just click on this button, you can put in any address from our API and any value that you want to use to specify somebody. And this is the same thing that we were doing just in Isadora, but this is through the companion API. So every OSC program that you work with is going to give you the option to edit your payloads and your addresses. And you just have to figure out what the best way to do that is, and then of course what the trigger is in the program you're using.
Seems like possibilities are completely endless. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a lot.
And just, you may sometimes in some programs have to tell it whether it's an integer, a string, or a float. But most of the time, the program that you're working with can just detect that and work with it.
And Roscoe, did you have something as well?
Well, I was just going to say, the question asked about making a GUI, and so I would say QLab is not a GUI. QLab is a sequencer, as opposed to something like a Stream Deck or Companion, which would be much more, in my mind, what a GUI would be for OSC.
Next question.
Jim Wilkins from Marblehead, Massachusetts says, can Zoom OSC control any parameters in Zoom that can't be accessed any other way?
Most of them can be accessed by another method, but we give you information that can't be accessed any other way on the return line. So we're bidirectional OSC. So we'll tell you things about the meeting as well that you don't get in any sort of explicit format, like the volume of somebody else's mic on the far end or something like that, for example.
You go ahead, Roscoe.
Andy's much too humble, because what it does is there might be 14 button clicks to get to that feature in Zoom to do it, and Andy will do it in one.
And a reminder, Andy, next week we're starting the Zoom OSC training for everybody. So
we're really excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll put that out in the emails starting over this weekend. But we're really excited to have Andy doing that next weekend. So stay tuned for that. So give us some more examples of how OSC might be used, as far as how you guys use it. You're talking to Locke. You talked about the lighting board and firing things off based on it. Do you have other examples that you can kind of talk to there? Yeah, go ahead, Talon.
One time I needed to keep, it wasn't super mission critical, as you call it. I like that terminology, but I needed to keep playheads together on two projectors computers, two media servers. And so I just sent the playhead position on OSC between two machines, and I was able to keep them close enough. And this is on an intranet, not over the WAN.
So it's on a LAN, and they were close enough. They were within a frame or whatever that needed to be in. So plus or minus 30 milliseconds.
And it was the type of sync I needed it to be synced enough for more artistic, atmospheric looks, and not necessarily for lips and words.
Right. No, right. Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think that it's funny. Basically, any program that I touch and have access to the source code on, my first step is to add OSC. And it's funny, if you look at my work at Cast, you can pretty much figure out what features I work on by two things: if it has automatic computer vision calibration, or if it has OSC. If it has OSC, I probably made that. But the reason I love it so much is, like, we'll have at different places I've worked, there's been project managers who spend tons and tons of money on a GUI, right, for the program, and then they'll ask for a fraction of that money to go into an OSC API for their program. And then I'll watch the client use the program. They use the GUI to set it up, and they will use the OSC for the remainder of the use of that program because they have their favorite controller that they'd rather use instead. I think remote control is critical, so I'll put it on everything from, I've made programs that will do, like, it'll tell you the location of facial landmarks in computer vision over OSC. I've done things.
How does that work? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So I made an app called Oculo that what it does is it uses OpenCV to analyze the face, find the facial landmarks, runs a machine learning model on the CPU. And then I had to ask myself, how do I want to get that out? Now I've found the landmarks, but I want to send it to other programs. So this was for a project where I was doing soft body facial projection mapping. I needed a butterfly on a performer's face to map to their face, no matter where their face was in 3D space. And so I had a computer vision system set up to find their face. But now
are they on a stage, or are they just sitting right? They're sitting right in front of a camera or something.
They were on a stage, but we were able to position a camera so that we could see them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I need to do is tell, in this case, Blender, where that face model could be located in its corresponding coordinate system. So I could render a camera from the perspective of the projector to get the mapping to go out to the program. So I could have set up a UDP pipe. I could have set up a Windows pipe. I could have done something that was, exclusive between the communication between my programs. But by using OSC, I could debug it in Isadora. I could share it with other folks who had OSC capable devices. And that's part of the beauty, is the amount of adoption that there is for OSC. So anytime I have interprogram communication, it's OSC behind it. And the facial landmarks were just packed up and sent, /landmark, /1, and then it's X and it's Y position.
How many landmarks did you have to send out to sync it up?
I sent 68 facial landmarks, whatever I think it was 67 or 68 at a time.
And were you working from a scan of their face, or were you working with kind of a generic facial geometry?
I've done it both ways over the years, but in that particular demo, I had created a personalized scan of the face, imported it into Blender, and done it that way. In later years, I did something at Smithsonian where we used actual point clouds that were live generated, and did the machine learning live in the point cloud without a reference model to start with. So,
did you how did you handle with frame, frame accuracy? Like, did it slip at all, or was it sticking on their face pretty accurately?
It was a proof of concept. So all I would have had to do is throw Genlock into it, and then I would have had it. But I didn't have a Genlocked projector, or access to one at the time, and I didn't have a Genlocked camera. But it would have been possible to do that. I wouldn't really use OSC for a Genlocking, protocol. Mm-hmm. Soft Genlock generally is frowned upon. No matter what protocol it is, you throw a wire when you want Genlock. But it could have worked that way.
And so it's sending out. When it's sending that over OSC, it just has a bunch of data points, and then that's a thing where you would have basically all those data points are flowing into that packet that to simplify it for folks. So they're all like 1 through 68 or whatever, and here are the values, and those values you're sending in are XYZ, or
it'll be 68 packets, each containing, because every packet has one address, and it can have an arbitrary number of payloads. So in this case, there were 68 packets, each containing one address that specified which landmark it was on the face, and then 2 payloads, the X and Y position in the 2D frame of the camera where that landmark could be found.
Got it. And so it's okay. And so 68 packets, and then 2 payloads, right? Or two things in the payload.
2 arguments.
For each one. And then Do they and how do they stay synced? As far as those packets going out?
Yeah, it worked out. I did some stuff in the other things in the software that synchronized the dispersal of the packet to the frame rate of the camera. Again, not true gen lock, but pretty darn close. So
looks like we have a question.
Yeah, actually, it's mine. I wanted to ask Andy. Now that OSC is out there and has been for a while, my suspicion is that you continuously run across situations where you say to yourself, this tool could really help people get more done easier in this case. I'm watching them do something and OSC could make a difference for them. Can you recall any of those? Because as with lots of, this tool does tons of different stuff. I'm having a little trouble kind of visualizing how it might affect my life directly. So are there use cases that you've said, oh, that would be great. I don't have time to do that right now, but I just want to spread out the idea of how it can be used.
So jump to Roscoe and then we'll come back to Andy.
I was just going to say, one use that he just talked about, the Oculo. I know the construction industry, when they're building a building, there's certain things that are very critical to the security of the building. And so they actually document the faces that touch that piece of equipment through a recording. So something like what Andy's doing, which actually can find that face. And we now know that whoever touched the electrical, whatever most important system while they're doing a building is registered or is recorded.
It's quite possible there. Andy?
Basically, anytime you want to have remote control of something, I will first see, is there an OSC API for this program? So like your ATEM, for example, maybe you need to have, if you're doing a theater piece and you want Isadora as your media server, but you want to have physical cameras switched by Isadora so that when you go to the next cue in your show, it remote controls all the other devices. Cloud kind of does the opposite of that, using the light board to tell Isadora to move to the next scene, but you can have basically all of this array of software and hardware interfaces communicating with each other to go to the next step or pick a certain input. It's exactly what we're doing with Zoom OSC, just treating it like some sort of control device that is receiving commands from the controlling program. So I first would think about remote control, and then I would think about inter-program communication. That to me is critical. Any piece of software, I generally need it to talk to something else, and when I want it to talk to something else, I usually will use OSC for that.
Have you used OSC at all to interface with, like, let's say an Arduino and actually execute electrical connections? So I want to, I want to fire something off, or I want to control something with an Arduino. So I'm going to be running, let's say, motors, out. So, and now let me make it specific and ask you how you would do this. So I'm building right now, I think I showed it a little while earlier, is I'm starting to work on a PTZ head for a camera. And the issue that I have with the PTZ head for the camera is that I needed to carry a heavy payload, but I don't want to spend a lot of money. I don't want to pay for high performance. I just need to pan and tilt. Like I just need to go like this or like this to frame somebody up in the thing. But I need to be able to put 35 pounds on top of that piece. And so there's nothing that solves that problem that I found. So right now what I'm working on is, I know someone who just did built a camera control rig for a TV show. And so they may have told me what motors to get. so I've got some motors and controllers for those motors that are there. And what I want to do is I want to control those motors, but I want to be able to, basically I want a joystick on my side that lets me move that camera around as I need it and have it translated to that. So how would I do that in OSC?
OSC is so friendly for DIY projects. I have an installation up at a museum right now that is exactly that scenario. There's a program that we have these robots that dance, and they're all powered by Arduinos. And I put a Ethernet shield on the Arduino so it can talk OSC. And what I have is just a program.
What makes the Ethernet shield talk OSC?
Well, you need to have Ethernet ability in order to communicate OSC. So you deploy the two libraries on the Arduino. You need a library that can talk for the Ethernet, physical connector, and then you need a library that can understand OSC coming on that connector. Right.
So and those
are very
easy
easy
to get.
You can pick those up.
Yep. Okay. And
so
then go ahead.
So once I have that, I can now get the address and payloads in. And what I did is I had, the robots had some pre-programmed move. They had lighting instruments on them. So I might say, /robot1 lighting macro and then 1, and then it would go find the macro for that lighting effect and trigger it on the robot. And then I'd have,
and it's not finding that lighting effect on the Arduino, it's finding it on your software and then executing it as a low level control back to the Arduino.
I gave it both options. I gave it some coded in macros that were just faster to execute on there because they were like, a wipe or something, or all to one color. But then I also gave it the ability to specify a pixel with the first 2 arguments, right, up and down, and then find the pixel, and then set RGB. So it had 5 arguments coming to it. For the motors, I had also predefined motor moves that were like, extend this arm all the way up and all the way down in sequence, or give me an angle and give me what motor on the body of this robot that we wanted to talk to. And then we would have encoder feedback. So that was the other thing that was fun, is that we should read the motor's encoder and send it back over OSC saying /robot1 /arm /encoder, and it would tell you the angle of that encoder in case you had to pull it from the controller. So if you needed live feedback in your control device, you could get that bidirectional connection. Arduinos are so much fun with OSC. I'll throw it on everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Tlaloc. You had something earlier.
Yeah, speaking to Bill's question, I think that if you think of your studio and you think of all the things that you have that are not from the same company and have proprietary ways of communicating with each other, or with other things from that company, OSC allows you to translate between all of them and have remote control in a better way to every one of those proprietary pieces of equipment. And I said it that way because I don't know what you actually have. But for example, when I was doing a live switch dance show that was alternating between pre-recorded and dance because of needing to clean the space for COVID, I had an OSC trigger that would switch me into my playback feed automatically, so that I didn't end up, in a dark on a camera or whatever it was, or seeing the cleaners. And it all just happened in the right sequence because I was able to connect the ATEM with Isadora. So it's combining things that otherwise would not be able to talk to each other.
And so it's a little kind of digital Tower of Babel in that sense.
Or translating. Tower of Babel would be the other direction, right? It'd be the Rosetta Stone, probably.
There you go. Okay.
The Tower of Babel is going one way. The Rosetta Stone is trying to come the other way. Let's all be one. So in many ways, you need a translator on one side that says, I'm going to convert it into a known set of packets. And then you need so that's like the encoder, Isadora or QLab or Zoom OSC or things like that. I'm going to take all the things that are happening over here and put them into a known format, or a format that's definable. And then that's the encode. And then on the decode, I'm going to grab all that stuff that's being transported to me in those packets, and I'm going to convert them to the language that's required for this other thing over here. So I might have Zoom OSC doing one thing, and it knows how to deal with, it knows how to turn Zoom stuff into OSC. And then I have ATEM OSC on the other side that knows how to take that OSC and turn it back into ATEM commands. Am
I think you might be missing one step. And the thing is that most manufacturers are going to have their individual APIs. So Zoom OSC does not know itself how to talk to an ATEM, but Isadora knows how to listen to anything and then send anything. So by having this mezzanine program that can listen to all the other things that are talking and then route it to other things that want to talk, you might say on my ATEM, I want to have something happen when Alex mutes. Now, Zoom OSC doesn't know how to tell the ATEM that, but Isadora knows how to talk to anything.
But ATEM OSC will do that, right? ATEM OSC will take the OSC command and then turn it into an ATEM command, right?
Yes, yeah. ATEM OSC, yeah, it would do that. But to trigger that, you'll need something that can build that rule. That's like, when I see this incoming OSC packet, send that outcoming OSC packet. And something like ATEM OSC doesn't necessarily do that. You need this additional piece of software to make the rules for how to use it.
So you have a Rosetta Babbler that has.
So what would be so if I wanted Zoom OSC to control an ATEM, what would be all the tools that I needed to do that?
Well, in the specific case of Zoom OSC, we actually do give you the ability to send a user-defined OSC packet on the output side. So in theory, nothing. But in the old way of working, because I got frustrated with this workflow, I would have would have like Isidore, for example, just because I could visually mock it up and show you. I would have something that would receive from Zoom OSC, and then it would decode it, and then there would be like a comparing thing that would be like, if I got this, fire this packet, and then the outgoing packet would be the ATEM's OSC API, and it would say like, preview input 1, and so it would send an OSC. So Isidore would receive an OSC packet from Zoom OSC, and then send an OSC packet to the ATEM.
Right, but the ATEM can't get the OSC packet directly, right? It needs. Does the ATEM?
I think
there's a little. I thought there was a little widget. I had to use a little widget in Mac to do that. But,
yeah, there's a piece of software that you can throw in there. It's not necessarily like I don't think it's ATEM OSC, but it's something else. Like something that goes in there. Yeah.
Super passive. Once you turn it on, you don't do anything to it. Like it just sits there and translates it.
Because you're basically sending almost the same command. You're sending the actual command for the ATEM from OSC, because you can put whatever you want into it. So the command that you want, you just send it verbatim. So you just need something that's going to inject it into the ATEM.
That's right. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Because you don't have to translate it, because it's not numbers. It's not you don't have to have it in some coded thing. You just tell it.
And I think that's really key, is that OSC, one of its really fantastic qualities is that it's clear text. So you can name it what you want to name it, and you don't have to be like, what is 23896?
Right. Courtney.
So there has to be a messaging program. Does it work with IFTT? If this, then that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You can have a lot of fun if you want to have open in the garage door, turn on all the lights, and you want to have OSC from this Arduino embedded in your garage door opener, like, go to town. Like, you could totally do all that stuff. Yeah.
Go ahead. I think we got a couple questions.
We do. In fact, Guy Cochran is in with one that's fascinated me too. Everybody is looking at Talak here and going, how did you get a headset in your car working, obviously, maybe on your cell phone or something like that? And we like it. So what are you using?
It's the Parrot 450 Bluetooth. And I really had planned on being home and having a nice setup. It didn't work out that way.
That's good. We're glad to have you here. I was a little worried. So what happened is that we had DMX last week, and Talak and Andy and a few other folks all showed up, and I was like, well, that was easy. Let's do OSC next week, because we've got a great group that are showing up on Fridays, and we'll throw it in there. And then nobody was, like when we were doing the mic check, I was like, I was like emailing Andy going, help. So I should have been a little bit more focused on it anyway, but we're glad to have you, Talak.
I'm in Florida on a show, and at an Airbnb, and I'm like, I've set it all up to be good for Friday. Right. I need to look good for Friday. Well, turns out the show had a fire I had to put out. And so I was literally like on a football field when second hour started, and I'm like, I got to run to the car.
Well, thank you so much. That's amazing that you're here. So thank you.
It's great. You're coming in effectively.
Yeah.
You're able to communicate.
You sound
beautifully.
good. You look
That's
good.
why everybody's excited.
Yeah. We're like, how is he doing that? All right. Next question.
Moving on to another one from Jonas Dattel of Reutlingen. Is there any response in OSC, or do I just send an OSC request back?
Yes and no. And Talak knows why. So there are ways that you can send OSC over TCP. And in that case, you sort of get that implicit talkback. Some APIs will choose to implement a return, even if they're using UDP, to say a success or something like that has occurred. But the specification itself does not require the talkback. Folks have chosen to implement that layer, but it's optional.
How do you manage error correction? So lost packets or something. Let's say I want to send OSC over the internets, and I want to deal with that. What do you do there, Andy?
Streamweaver. I turn it into SRT, use SRT packet reconstruction, send it back. That's the only way to do it. I mean, you can send it over UDP, sure, and over WAN, but you're going to drop packets, and the problem, like for DMX, is bad enough because it might hop when you're doing a fade.
Right.
If you're sending a control packet, if you lose that packet, you're in big trouble. You missed your trigger.
So really the solution is, I admit I threw you a bit of a softball there, but so Streamweaver is the I was like, how hard is he going to swing? So anyway, so anyway, this one's coming in at 55 miles an hour. So anyway, so Streamweaver is the way, that really is what it does, right? I mean, it's taking those OSC commands or taking those control commands and making sure absolutely that they get from one side to the other. Yeah, that's great. Talk.
Yeah, in our two use cases that I had at Salisbury University this past fall, we were doing ArtNet over Streamweaver, we were doing OSC over Streamweaver, and we were doing some bidirectional work that way too. And that's just very crude error checking. You were asking about error checking. That's just very crude error checking where you might say, did a thing happen? And you send back a message that it did. And so that way you can do something with that message, right? And say, oh, it happened. Okay, great.
And you could use Apple's own automation tools to tie that into OSC as well. So if you want to use Siri, so here's the one that I'm trying to figure out. This is my little puzzle. I have a hot tub, and it's got some old little controller that I have been theorizing on replacing. I want to be able to just tell Siri to turn the hot tub on and then have Siri tell me when the hot tub's at 104 degrees. So that
Siri,
it seems
draw
like
my bath.
exactly. But so the thing is, it's been since we moved into the house came with it, and it's kind of old, and it's not like it's a nice hot tub. It's just there, but it seems like that would be something that with the Arduino would be used, and Arduino with an Arduino Shield would be used to do the electrical contacts. I've kind of figured out how the heater works, right? I've mapped the heater controls, and those are going to be low level, just turn on and off, that I can do with the Arduino. But it seems like that connection using Apple's automation tools would seem to work, right? How would you connect those to OSC though?
I would use Apple's automation, IFTT, and then OSC on the Arduino. So what I'd have the Arduino do is when it receives an OSC packet from IFTT, start heating up the tub, then take the thermal probe that's attached to the Arduino and pump it out to IFTT. Give it, this is the temperature of the water now. This is the temperature of the water now, maybe every 30 seconds or something like that. And then IFTT, once it detects, hey, we hit the optimum temperature that you defined as, hot tub ready, tell Apple automation to go tell Siri to go yell at you that your hot tub's ready.
Right. I'll send a video when it's working. I've been slowly working toward it. I have the Arduino. I mapped out all the connections, but it's all between every job. And so if I get busy, I can't get to it. So anyway, so that's
if you have a Arduino Yun, I'll literally give you the OSC library that I modded and made for it. So just let me know.
For a hot tub, you have a mod for a hot tub?
No, I have a mod that makes it really easy to set that up though. It's like pick the wire, pick the OSC command, set the voltage.
Oh
that
yeah.
kind of thing.
No, that'd be great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sounds good. Any other questions that we have here? This is a pretty deep one. Now, one question I had, I guess, is that would you wish that, like, for instance, OSC worked in lights instead of DMX? Like, is that would you want to have OSC, like an Ethernet cable into lights, and just have it be OSC to control them?
It does.
Well, it does.
You've kind of stumped me. That's a really good question. I don't know if it would be better or worse.
I don't think it would. Yeah, I don't think I would want that. I almost would. The beauty of OSC is its flexibility, but it's also its greatest weakness. Like when you're doing lighting, you're doing a very specific thing, and you don't need all of the flexibility that OSC offers you.
Right.
And in fact, it could get in the way. If I had to define for every lighting manufacturer, like all your presets, I want to gobo this, I got to go look up the OSC command for this gobo and make sure my board is, defined with that. DMX is, because it's so like intentionally used for lighting, it's optimized for that workflow. But OSC is great because it's so broad, but it would make the setup process probably a lot more complicated.
Right. It's a lot.
But on the other hand, there's a GitHub for ETC, and somebody I think who used to work at ETC made an OSC remote control for the light board, and it's called OSC RFR, and it totally is way better than anything ETC made. And so, yes, we use it for lighting, but it just in a different way, and more of a remote control kind of way.
Next, go ahead, Roscoe, and then we'll go to the last questions.
Well, we really didn't talk a lot about. We did talk about RDM in the DMX protocol, and so isn't that really the go-between? Or I'd like to hear your opinion on RDM and how well implemented it is for DMX.
My opinion is that it's not well implemented. You have to have a very specific set of kind of expensive lights for it to work. And when you don't have those expensive lights, it kind of breaks everything else. And what it is it's a return packet that talks about the state and health of a dimmer or a light. It's essentially error checking, but it has put more flickering in systems I've dealt with than I can count.
Isn't it most useful though for initially setting up the light, so you know that light takes 16 channels? I mean, immediately it reports back to you how many channels that of DMX that takes.
Perhaps. I've always needed to look at the manual.
Or the built-in fixture library, right? Like your console probably,
right?
If it's a common light, it's already worked that out.
Okay.
Next question.
Jonas Dattell of Reutingen said, as someone who now wants to implement OSC into his program, are there any good practices to implement it? Common errors to avoid?
Well, on the software side, pick a good library. Don't reinvent the wheel. Figure 53, who makes QLab, has made public their OSC implementation for Objective-C. So if you're on the Mac, that's the library to use. At the risk of disclosing too much about how Zoom OSC works, but it's terrific. I mean, and it's very flexible. The mistake you'll make is if you go pick a OSC implementation that's not complete or that isn't flexible enough for what you want to do, and then you have to completely redo your program when you pull that library out because you wanted to get that address parsing packet as well, and your library doesn't implement that. It just gives you the address and the whatever. That's why I went back to the bare bones and implemented the original OSC spec for Zoom OSC, because it gave me everything I could possibly ever want. But pick a good library, and then the library should handle all of the the bits and bobs. The other lesson I'll tell you from running an API for a program that has given me a lot of user feedback is think about the OSC addresses like the way that the manufacturer of OSC kind of created it, not the way that it's like most commonly used today. So what I mean by that is like that address is supposed to be basically the same pattern as a Unix file system designator. It's supposed to be a tree, and a lot of people these days are using OSC in a very verbose way. They're using they'll make, and we were guilty of this too on Zoom OSC. We had commands that were like basically all in the level 1 section of that tree, and we just had this very, very, we'd go from level 1 Zoom to all of the different commands in Zoom OSC, and there was rarely a third argument. But that's not really as intuitive as what we're doing now, where we can specify like, all right, Zoom OSC, so you zoom in the first packet, then the second packet is going to be how you want to address users, then the third packet is going to be any exceptions to that group, and the fourth packet will then be the specifier. That is the sort of tree diagram that allows you to have really, really powerful APIs that build off of each other. Instead of doing what I originally did, which was just brute force all of the commands in the level 1. And I learned that by learning about how OSC was developed and why people did it the way they did. It's supposed to be a tree. It's supposed to be like a file path. So when you build your API, keep that in mind, because that'll allow you to be really flexible in the future, and it's intuitive for the end user.
That's great. Last question.
Well, the last question was mine, and since we're going to be doing this on office hours, when people are first coming to learn OSC, what are the biggest confusions or misconceptions they arrive to the program with for the first time? What stops people from being able to grok it?
I think understanding networking is a roadblock for some folks. Like they might not know that like if I want to talk to that computer over there, I need to make sure that I have its private IP address and that they're not segmented by a subnet that's blocking that. you know, if there's a firewall in the system, I need to go make sure that the firewall is not blocking that port. Can't tell you how many support tickets I've gotten for Zoom OSC because somebody forgot to check, you know, the yes box when Windows says, would you like to let this through your firewall? So I think those are the most common support tickets that we get in on the OSC specifically.
And in general, probably most people go into this with they are getting into OSC by using it through another application. They don't necessarily are kind of hard coding it. So it's really an Isadora, it's a QLab, it's a, you know, those types of things are, you know, kind of where you're going to start running up against it, right? Is using those interfaces for it. They're using OSC. You're not necessarily using OSC directly. Is that generally how people get into it? Go ahead, Talak.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was something I learned about by using Isadora. And then I was like, oh, look at all these things I can do with this. And then I started to do things with it. And then I started to build it into things I use every day, you know, tools I use every day.
Is there an automation platform that you like better or that is equivalent to what it does?
Not really. I think MIDI would be the closest thing.
Yeah, MIDI, I think for sure. Or MIDI show really control.
Right.
MIDI show control, I think, but that one of the reasons that I moved away from MIDI show control into OSC was because I didn't want to have to go buy a MIDI adapter every time I was in a new venue. Because I really do like to implement show control on shows, particularly with some shows that are super complicated. And I want, for example, a mixer in a musical to an audio mixer in a musical to be able to mix the show instead of taking cues. So I really do implement a lot of show control, and I hate it when I need to go get a MIDI adapter, whereas just having an Ethernet between two machines is a lot easier, and a switch.
Right. That's great. Thanks, guys. Really glad you guys showed up. It would have been a shorter call. But really, really great. And again, I think that what I'm trying to do with some of these Fridays is really digging into some of these control units. We're not going to know it all at one time, but to start getting our head around what those things look like and kind of build a group of people inside of our group. The concept that I have around this that we were pretty successful with in Pixel Core, and that we're kind of bringing back to this here, is the idea of peer-to-peer learning, where if enough of us, it's kind of like the learning model. I'm watching the news, and it's kind of like the learning model of herd immunity. So when a certain number of us understand it, then, you know, if a certain number of us understand it, then we all start understanding it. And the big thing is that we all start understanding it faster. So when we have a core community that isn't changing all the time, that is, you know, in Discord and here, our ability, you know, when we're all thinking about the same thing at the same time together, and we all start getting up to speed, when we get the instructor out of the way, you know, like, and we just have it be like what we're trying to do is work with folks that really know it, like Talak and Andy on these protocols, and, you know, Greg and Roscoe on other protocols, and you know, Courtney and Beju and everyone else. But the idea is that we're all learning things from each other. But as we all get this understanding, we all start speeding up. You know, and so because you can get you create a nutrient-rich environment, you know, for learning, you know, where there's a lot of people that can answer your questions in real time. Half the time it's just, yeah, there's a lot of answers on the internet, but you don't know which ones to pay attention to. And we're able to kind of do that within this community, and it's kind of a unique thing. So we're going to keep on kind of doing this, introducing this to you and just seeing what sticks. You know, and so I think that there are certain technologies that I think are important, OSC, DMX, Zoom OSC, that we're going to spend, you know, as well as things like Resolve and other things like that, that I think as we piece all this together, what we're creating is a group of people that really understand how to execute the next generation of content, you know, next generation of how we, you know, come together. So anyway, so thanks everybody. Thanks to our experts. Thank you so much for coming. And also thank you to the panel for being here every day. It's just amazing to have you here. And thank you to all the attendees that ask great questions every day. Keep us going. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into the post show and see some of you there. And then otherwise I will see the rest of you hopefully tomorrow. All right.